Vintage Model Traction Engine Restoration, Part 1, the Initial Examination. It's Sunday, the 11th of October 2020, and around lunchtime a man called Mark and his young son arrived at the workshop, and they brought this with them. It's an interesting old traction engine. It was built by one of the relatives of the owner, and as such this old traction engine has immense sentimental value. It's already had a rebuild with a brand new boiler fitted, a very good boiler, made from copper, welded together. So thankfully that is one part of the engine I don't have to work on. I get to work on almost everything else. The owner of the engine is going to send me a list of what's wrong with it, and I will probably find more than that. The first thing to look at is the cylinder block and the crosshead. The parts are not very well finished, and I'm not going to refinish them. The whole point of this is it is going to be a sympathetic restoration. To use the phrase of antique dealers, I want to preserve the patina or patina. I'm only going to repair the parts of this engine that aren't working properly. I've already seen one or two things that I don't particularly like, but I'll discuss that in a future episode. Moving backwards along the top of the boiler, here's the most important part. Is the crankshaft bent? No, I don't think so. Are the bearings very sloppy? Yes, indeed. Do the main bearings show signs of human intervention? Yes. Look at the state of the fixing studs. This doesn't look good. On the right-hand side of the engine is the water pump. This is driven by the crankshaft. I like the design of this pump because the ram is hollow, which acts as an oil reservoir and keeps the end of the eccentric rod lubricated. The owner reports that it leaks water very badly. On top of the cylinder block is a whistle. It's come unsoldered from its base and it's not original. I think I'll change this for an excellent PM Research whistle. The owner said that the regulator didn't work, and he was quite right, it had no function whatsoever. This is after I started to straighten the input shaft, because it was very bent. I haven't finished straightening it, but already the regulator's working. This is one of the wheels. They look to be quite well made. It's just a pity that someone's painted over the centre hubcaps, which are normally brass. I'm going to remove the paint and polish them up. This is a steering wheel, originally from a casting by the look of it, but in this case it's not been machined, it's been cleaned up by using a file. Not the nicest looking thing, but it's an original part of the engine, so this will stay just as it is. The gear train cover's very loose, this needs fixing. The reversing lever's not very well finished, and again it's been made by using a file, and once again, because this is a sympathetic restoration, I'm going to do nothing with it at all. It does what it's supposed to do and it works. The pressure gauge, which is just a commercial item, is well past its sell-by date, and the owner reported that when he steamed the engine, it filled up with water, so the gauge is scrap and even the siphon leaks at both ends. This is the gear selector, and it's most unusual because it can't be locked in position, it can be accidentally moved. And here you can see the result of frequently accidentally moving it. With traction engines, you definitely need to stop the crankshaft before engaging the gears. Luckily, most of the teeth are intact, so this should be okay. It's been like this for a long time. The motion moves very freely. Obviously the crankshaft moves freely because it's a rattle fit in the bearings at both ends. Here you can see some movement in the right-hand bearing cap, and you can also see the state of the studs that hold the bearing cap in place. I'm going to replace these with better ones. On the plus side, the crankshaft isn't bent and the flywheel runs quite truly. Once again, if you look on the steam chest, the studs holding the steam chest cover in place are not right at all. I will change this too. As a matter of course, I will change anything that's been bodged and fitted at a later date after manufacture. This is quite a nice touch, a removable chimney cap so you can polish it and put it back in place. The big question is, does it work? And if it does work, how well does it work? Here's my compressed air line. I'm going to put some compressed air in the boiler and give it a try. I'll stop talking whilst it's running. I'll be back shortly. I put about £30 per square inch of air into the boiler, and the engine ran, well, fairly well considering its condition. The splay in the small end, the big end and the main bearings. plus the valve timing is slightly out. It runs better going forward than it does backwards, and when I checked it, the valve timing is fractionally better in a forward motion than it is in reverse. Very much in fact like my large traction engine, which also runs better in forward than it does in reverse. I'm not going to run it for a long time in this short video, but I do need to make sure that the cylinder's getting some lubrication. It's not a mechanical lubricator, it's a displacement lubricator. And these don't work with compressed air, but by filling the lubricator right to the top and replacing the cap a couple of times, I can get some steam oil into the steam chest, which in turn will be fed to the cylinder. I'm quite pleased that the engine seems to respond to the regulator. That means that the port face of the regulator is probably not in too bad condition. When I look at the overall condition of the engine, there's a lot of work to do at it. To repair the fire hole door, for instance, I will need to remove the axle. The wheels have to come off anyway, because one of the drive plates is very rusty, and I want to make it so you can use a grease gun to lubricate the axle and the bearings. This is the new boiler that was fitted recently, and as you can see, it's a professionally made item. But unfortunately the fire hole door has snapped off. It was silver soldered and it's broken. I'm going to make a new hinge part on the fire hole door and fit it to the existing outer part of the hinge that's fixed to the boiler, because if you look carefully you will see that the hinge pin is riveted over at the end. Making a new hinge part is very simple. Fitting it is also simple once the axle's out of the way. The owner was dead right, the pressure gauge does leak. When I was running the engine on compressed air, I could hear a constant hissing noise from this area. So I'm going to remove it, but in order to get to it I need to take this off. And surprise, surprise, the pipe's fractured at the end. This pipe feeds the steam to the live steam injector, so I'll make up a new length of pipe all the way from the valve to the injector. Now I've moved this pipe out of the way, I can get to the steam union on the pressure gauge. 2 spanners are required for this job, one to hold the square part at the bottom of the pressure gauge and the other one to undo the union nut. This seemed to take an unfeasibly long time to get the union nut off the pressure gauge. Behind the pressure gauge is evidence of a bodge. At some stage the pressure gauge has been stuck to the bulkhead, ignoring the fact that there is a mounting hole just above it. This pressure gauge is a bit on the small side. I find it difficult to read. Relative to the full size, pressure gauges on model boilers are generally well over scale. That makes it possible to read what the pressure is. This pressure gauge is 3/4 of an inch in diameter. I'm going to fit a 1-inch diameter pressure gauge. The bunker tank of this engine is a separate tank inside the bunker, which is quite a good idea. The owner said that it leaks, so this has to come out and be repaired. There's plenty to do on this engine to keep me busy. Here's a bit of slow motion. And that's about it for the initial assessment. The engine's quite good, much better than I thought it was going to be, but it requires quite a lot of TLC, and I'm sure as I go along I will find more problems. I'm not being pessimistic, just realistic. And that's it for this episode, the initial inspection. Stay safe and healthy. Thanks for watching and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.